If you heard a loved one's voice from an old object, would you follow it even if it could hurt you? The room was bathed in a cold, sterile light, sharp and unyielding. The kind that did not forgive mistakes or hide shame. Richard Moore stood alone on the stage of the sleek conference room, his face flushed beneath the unforgiving glare of spotlights and the heavy silence that followed the stuttering failure of his presentation. The projected image flickered, a ghostly glitch of code that refused to obey his commands, morphing screens of promise into a void of error messages. The investors sat in rigid chairs across from him, faces impassive, eyes assessing with cold detachment. Their polished shoes barely moved, but their disinterest was a palpable force pressing down on Richard's chest, squeezing with a silent finality. A careless cough broke the silence, followed by the shifting of restless bodies. Richard's voice cracked as he fumbled with his notes, words gargled, lost in the growing weight of failure. Let me just. His hand waved toward the flickering screen, desperate to snatch clarity from chaos. An investor's clipped voice interrupted, sharp and unforgiving. Mr. Moore, is this a demonstration or a debacle? We invested in a vision, not glitches. Laughter then, polite, but undeniably biting, rippled through the room. Richard felt his skin crawl beneath the scrutiny, a visceral heat of humiliation flooding his veins. The gaze of 1,000 unspoken questions buried him deeper. His pulse thundered in his ears, the once steady rhythm of his heartbeat jerking to a frantic, discordant pace. The presentation ended with a stammer, his escape a hurried retreat off stage, swallowed by the murmurs and the clinking of glasses behind him. Lights dimmed. The room emptied. The silence morphed from oppressive to suffocating. Backstage, the faint buzz of the city's night spilled through air vents, harsh and indifferent, a reminder of a world moving endlessly forward while he stood unmoving, paralyzed by defeat. Richard's shoulders slumped as he sank onto a cold metal chair, fingers tangled in his disheveled hair. The smell of stale coffee and stale air mingled in the claustrophobic space, a small mirror of the tangled turmoil within. His hoodie, loose and worn, seemed heavier now, dragging at his frame like a shroud. His toes tapped restlessly, the sound sharp against the concrete floor, a frantic metronome marking minutes lost, opportunities squandered. He closed his eyes, wrestling with the heavy weight of rejection not just from others, but from himself. The flickering hope he once clung to now felt like ashes in his throat. The muffled echo of laughter, the sharp critique, the hollow approval all spiraled inward. His mind replayed the scene on loop, a brutal montage that chipped away at his confidence with every silent rewind. Suddenly, a faint light glimmered from the shadowed corner of the room, an antique brass compass, resting forgotten atop a dusty stack of crates. Its patina muted under the flickering lamp overhead, it seemed oddly out of place among modern chaos, a relic from another life. Richard's gaze locked onto the compass, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirring in the depths of his exhaustion, a fragile tether to a past he had long neglected. The old device sat silent, unassuming, but imbued with the promise of direction, an unspoken whisper compelling him to look beyond the failure, beyond the fear. His fingers twitched, yearning for connection. But the moment was shattered by the abrupt buzz of his phone vibrating violently against the metal chair. A text message glared from the screen, another demand, another reminder of the ruthless pace of his fractured world. He stared at the phone, mind heavy, heart raw, the compass gleaming faintly in the swallowed shadow beside him. Outside the window, the city lights glistened, a vast sea of restless steel and dreams, indifferent to the man in the dim room wrestling with his fading hope. The silence lingered, fragile, thick with possibility and loss. And Richard Moore sat still, the old compass a silent sentinel beside him, as the night whispered of truths waiting to be discovered. The conference room's door closed behind Richard with a soft but final thud, sealing the remnants of the audience's disbelief and muffled conversations away from him. The dimmed hallway felt cold, sterile, reflecting the lingering sting piercing his chest. His strides echoed hollow against the polished concrete floor as he moved away, the smear of failure catching at every step. His hoodie, unzipped and looser now, shifted against his skin like a burden he carried unwillingly. He leaned against the wall outside the bustling room, eyes cast downward, tracing cracks creeping through the chipped paint and old plaster fractures mirroring the fissures forming inside him. The hum of urban life outside filtered through tall windows. Cars droning, a distant siren, the faint rhythm of a city indifferent to his unraveling. A breath escaped him, shallow and uneven. The auditorium's laughter echoed faintly through the far walls, cruel ghosts riding the cold air. His mind unraveled the sequence of events in relentless loops, each iteration more unforgiving than the last. His words faltering on stage, the cursor frozen on an unresponsive screen, the sharp, dismissive jabs from investors accustomed to polished perfection. The weight of their disapproval pressed like oppressive fog, smothering every spark of hope. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to expel the surge of shame rising like heat from within. Anger welled too, buried beneath layers of exhaustion and self-reproach, twisting sharp and bitter. He sank slowly onto a battered couch in a forgotten corner of the building. The room was cold, lit only by the weak glow of a single desk lamp that cast a wavering pool of warmth onto stacks of forgotten papers and dusty photographs. Shadows danced at the edges, whispering of memories better left untouched. The faint gleam of an object caught his eye, a weathered wooden box tucked beneath a scattering of letters and journals. His fingers hesitated before reaching, brushing dust into the stale air, revealing the worn brass curves of an old compass, a relic from a life cautiously buried, from a father whose presence had grown distant in the fractured spaces of time. Richard held the compass delicately, as if afraid it might break or reveal something he had long avoided. The intricate needle trembled slightly, aligning steadily despite the chaos around him. A strange warmth seeped from its cold brass body, grounding him amidst the tremors of his spiraling thoughts. His phone buzzed on the couch beside him, another message demanding his attention, a string of urgent texts and missed calls flashing with relentless insistence. He ignored it, feeling the crushing pull of solitude tighten around his ribs. The city lights outside flickered intermittently through the window, alive and aloof as if mocking the stillness suffusing his hollowed core. His gaze settled once more on the compass, the old guide gleaming faintly beneath the wavering lamplight. A whispered thought, fragile and uncertain, hinted at another path, a path no longer dictated by failures but beckoning toward unknown truths. The night pressed in, thick with possibilities concealed beneath regret and doubt. Yet within that pressing silence, the faintest pulse of resolve began to stir, a breath, a whisper, a fragile ember in the sprawling dark. Richard Moore sat alone, compass in hand, caught between the ruin of yesterday and the uncharted promise of tomorrow. In the dim corner of a forgotten storage room, beneath layers of dust and relics of a past life, Richard's hand brushed against something cool and metallic. It was an old box he hadn't seen in years, buried beneath crates filled with files and artifacts tied to his Fathera man whose shadow loomed as large as the San Francisco skyline. His fingers trembled as he pulled the box forward, the weight familiar and strange, as if holding a vessel of forgotten truths. Lifting the lid released a quiet sigh into the stale air, stirring dust motes that caught the wavering light from a nearby lamp, its glow unsteady, flickering like a heartbeat struggling to survive amid the darkness. Inside, nestled carefully among yellowed letters and photographs, lay an exquisitely crafted brass compass. Richard's breath hitched. The compass, with its intricate needle poised to point unfailingly north, shimmered with gentle patina, relic of guidance and unspoken promises. He lifted the compass slowly, tracing its worn edges, feeling an odd warmth seep through the cool metal and into his palm. For a fleeting moment, a ghost of his father's presence seemed to stir beside him. Memories danced briefly in his mind, late nights in his father's study, the soft rustle of paper, the faint scent of aged wood and tobacco smoke. A sudden clatter from the hallway jolted Richard back. The city's pulse had not slowed for him, its restless whirl pulled insistently at his bones. Yet here, Amidst the old mementos, the chaotic noise was replaced by a quiet clarity that settled deep within his chest. The compass needle wavered awkwardly, as if uncertain, then steadied firmly toward an unseen horizon. Its quiet resolve mirrored a stirring inside him, a fragile seed of determination, a whisper of a path forward. The worn letters caught his eye, a stack tied with a cracked leather ribbon, edges curling like the slow unraveling of time itself. He untied them carefully, fingers unsteady with equal parts fear and anticipation. The faded handwriting held promises and secrets, weaving a tapestry linking past and present in a way he had not yet dared to imagine. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars, indifferent and infinite. Inside, Richard's world had narrowed to the small pool of light enveloping the compass and these relics of a life he scarcely understood. A faint tremor ran through him, the shadows of his failure momentarily touched by a flicker of hope. The journey ahead would not be easy, but the first step, the compelling call of something greater, had already begun. He closed the box gently, the compass safe within, and rose from the dusty floor with a steady breath. His eyes, though shadowed, held the spark of new resolve. The wavering study lamp above cast a warm circle of light, small yet unyielding, standing defiantly against the encroaching dark, a quiet beacon for a man poised at the crossroads of his past and the mystery of what lay ahead. Richard stepped into the night, the city pulsating around him, a living labyrinth of possibility and peril. And somewhere in the silent spaces between the neon and shadow, the compass's needle pointed him forward, into the unfolding story of self-discovery and redemption. The city's early morning haze filtered through the cracked window of Richard's cluttered apartment, casting a muted light over the scattered remnants of a forgotten life, old sketches, a dusty keyboard, and the brass compass resting on a faded leather-bound journal. The quiet hum of distant traffic was a stark contrast to the chaos tumbling inside his mind. Hours had passed since his public humiliation. Yet, somewhere inside, a stubborn ember flickered. It was faint, easily drowned by waves of self-doubt, but it clung to the edges of his consciousness, begging for recognition. A knock at the door shattered the heavy stillness. Richard glanced up to see Mia, an old friend and confidant, silhouetted against the morning light. Her eyes held an understanding he desperately needed but rarely allowed himself to seek. "You can't stay buried in this alone," she said softly, stepping inside without waiting. Her presence was a balm, steady and unyielding. Richard exhaled slowly, gesturing toward the compass. "I don't even know where to start anymore." Mia smiled faintly, eyes falling on the relic. "Maybe here. Sometimes the past holds the keys we need." Together, they sifted through the fragile letters and journals, each page a brittle bridge to a father Richard barely knew. The words were crude, scrawled in haste yet filled with cryptic insights and unfinished dreams. As Richard read aloud, his voice trembled but gained strength with each line. "It's like a map, but not one you can follow on a screen. It's more personal." The day advanced, the soft golden light ebbing and flowing with the shift of clouds outside. With each rediscovery, Richard felt the stirrings of clarity weaving through the fog of his broken confidence. There were no immediate answers, only fragments that teased at deeper mysteries. He stood before the window, the compass heavy in his palm, its needle aligning stubbornly north. Beyond the glass, San Francisco breathed vast, indifferent, illuminated. Yet in that quiet moment, Richard felt a thread connecting him to something larger than the relentless grind of startups and failed launches. Mia's voice broke through the reverie. "You've been chasing validation outside yourself. Maybe this is the moment to chase it within." Richard nodded, the weight of her words settling deep. But even as hope nudged awake, the shadows clung, a whisper of betrayal lurking unseen in the corners of his world, a revelation yet to unfold. He pocketed the compass and journal cautiously. Ahead lay weeks of searching, unearthed secrets, and painful truths. Yet for now, the first step had been taken, fragile, uncertain, but irrevocable. The morning light waned. The city stretched endlessly beyond, alive with possibility and foreboding. And Richard Moore, for the first time in many nights, felt the flicker of a guiding star in the darkness. The sterile glow of the office fluorescents hummed overhead as Richard sat curled over an old desk cluttered with yellowing letters and faded photographs, fragments of a past he barely understood, yet desperately sought to claim. The room felt colder now, the warm haze of hopeful dawn having given way to an unsettled twilight, the weight of looming betrayal pressing down with heavy inevitability. His phone buzzed sharply on the desk, a terse message blinking across the screen. "Meet me." Urgent. The sender's name was obscured, a shadow of secrecy that sent an icy spike through his chest. He hesitated, fingers hovering, caught between the fragile trust he was rebuilding and the creeping suspicion clawing at his thoughts. A soft knock rattled the doorframe. Tom, a colleague whose smile rarely reached his eyes, stepped inside. His demeanor was casual, almost too calculated, a mask barely concealing something sharper beneath. "We need to talk," Tom said, voice low, eyes flicking briefly toward the scattered papers. "This digging into your father's things isn't making you any friends around here." Richard's jaw clenched. "I'm looking for truth. You've shut doors closed on the project." "Why?" Tom's smile twisted, colder now. "That's your call, but be careful, some truths can sink you." Suddenly, the office door creaked open wider, and a stack of files was shoved roughly onto the desk. Richard glanced down. The files bore familiar project codes but contained glaring anomalies: missing deadlines, smudged signatures, rewritten reports. Evidence of sabotage hidden beneath layers of corporate polish. "Someone's bleeding your vision dry," Tom muttered. "And you're too naive to see who." Richard's pulse quickened, anger and betrayal interlacing. This was no longer an abstract failure but a direct assault. The compass resting beside him on the desk felt heavier, its needle trembling slightly, as if in sympathy. Hours bled into night as Richard's fingers traced the documents, piecing together a puzzle that cut closer to home with every revelation. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth of corporate politics, an unseen enemy lurked, threatening to erode everything he held dear. Outside, the city lights sputtered like distant stars fighting a persistent fog. In the quiet solitude of his office, Richard's resolve hardened. Mia's message blinked again on his phone, words of encouragement and a whispered warning: "Trust cautiously." The past has eyes everywhere. Taking a deep breath, Richard closed the files and reached for another envelope, this one sealed with his father's familiar insignia. As he broke the wax seal, a folded note slipped free, its handwriting unmistakable yet cryptic: "Not all who wander are lost, but some paths are hidden until the moment is right." His gaze flickered to the compass. The wavering light from the desk lamp flicked once, casting elongated shadows on the walls, mirroring the uncertainty lingering in his heart. A sudden rattling noise echoed down the hallway, an unexpected sound in the otherwise hushed building. Richard's senses sharpened, the fragile bubble of occasional hope now punctured by the ominous reality closing in. His whispered vow cut through the stillness: "I will find the path, no matter the cost." And as the shadows lengthened and deepened, Richard Moore faced not only the external maze of deception but the internal tempest of trust and betrayal, inching ever closer to the revelations that might redefine everything. The faint creak of the ancient floorboards beneath Richard's feet echoed through the dimly lit study, a room steeped in silence and shadows, a sanctuary where time seemed to have folded onto itself. He ran his fingers across the leather-bound books and scattered papers cluttering his late father's desk, the scent of aged wood and faded ink filling the air around him. The brass compass lay prominently before him, its needle steady in the wavering light of the desk lamp. Yet it was the fragile letter he now held that tethered him to a crossroads of past and future, a cryptic note from his father, scrawled with a hurried hand, the ink smudged with age and emotion. "The path is not always visible, but the compass will guide your heart. Seek the place where we first dreamed." Richard's eyes scanned the faded script, the weight of those words settling deep into his bones. Hope mingled uneasily with doubt. The mysterious place teased his mind, carving open new questions amid old wounds. Memories surged, unbidden nights spent in this very room, his father's voice a distant echo beneath the hum of city lights. They'd spoken of grand visions, innovations that could change lives, and ideals that stretched beyond mere technology. But there had always been shadows beneath the optimism, a withheld secret, a lurking void Richard now sensed more acutely. His heartbeat quickened as he sensed the fragile thread of clarity beginning to unravel the tangled tapestry of his failure and his father's unspoken legacy. Suddenly, a soft rustle drew his gaze to the edge of the desk, where a hidden compartment gleamed faintly beneath the grime. With meticulous care, Richard pried it open, revealing a forgotten cache of documents, blueprints, patents, and a small, dust-covered notebook. As he leafed through the fragile pages, a chilling realization gripped him. Details of the very project that had collapsed under his own stewardship were entwined with undisclosed partners and shadowed agendas. Betrayal wasn't just a specter at his door, it was penned into the fabric of his endeavor. His breath hitched as he discovered references to a colleague whose name had surfaced in whispered conversations, someone he thought a friend. The betrayal had been closer than he ever imagined. Behind the wavering light, his own reflection flickered in the study's antique glass, a fractured visage torn between grief and determination. The silence thickened, heavy with the weight of truth. Richard's voice broke the stillness, barely above a whisper. "I thought I failed alone. But this changes everything." The compass seemed to pulse in response, an unwavering beacon amidst the storm of revelation. Outside, the storm clouds gathered over the city, mirroring the turbulent surge within him. Lightning briefly illuminated the skyline, a flash of clarity amid the gathering darkness. In that moment, Richard Moore knew his journey was no longer a solitary struggle against self-doubt, but a battle against unseen forces that sought to define his fate. As thunder rumbled softly in the distance, a final truth took form. To reclaim his vision, to honor his father's legacy, he must confront betrayal, uncover hidden enemies, and embrace a destiny far more complex than technology alone. The study lamp flickered once, then burned steady. Richard rose, the weight of the compass in his palm anchoring him to a renewed purpose. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and shadowed secrets. But he would walk it nonetheless, guided by truths illuminated in flickering light and the steady pulse of a compass untarnished by time. Rain thrashed against the slick glass of the high-rise office, the relentless beat a cold percussion over the city, mirroring the storm unraveling within Richard's chest. The room was dimly lit, suffused with the yellow-dinged glow of a lone desk lamp struggling to pierce the oppressive gloom. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick and suffocating, swallowing the details of scattered papers and an old brass compass lying abandoned. Richard sat slumped in a worn leather chair, head bowed low, tangled fingers clutching at his tousled brown hair. His face was pale, drained of the fire that had once burned bright, now etched with lines of fatigue and disbelief. The weight of betrayal pressed unbearably heavy, a crushing absence where trust and hope once had room to breathe. His eyes lifted briefly toward the fogged window, the city a blurred mosaic of steel and light shrouded in mist. Outside, the world surged relentlessly forward, indifferent to the collapse of one man's dreams. Yet here, within these walls, time seemed to drain away under cavernous silence. Visions of the conference replayed relentlessly, horseshoe rounds of derision, cold glances, the intangible but palpable withdrawal of faith. And now, the revelation of sabotage from a colleague once trusted raked through his mind like scalding water spilling over an open wound. His breath fluttered, ragged and unsteady. Words, once a source of clarity and conviction, now fled his lips as fractured whispers. How did it come to this? The study lamp flickered, casting erratic shadows that wavered with a desperate, dying light. Richard's fingers brushed absently the compass on the desk, its needle spinning erratically as if lost in the turmoil that plagued its keeper. Each empty beat of the clock anchored his spiraling thoughts, each tick a reminder that time marched on while he stagnated in the depths of his desolation. Tears welled momentarily, unbidden but cleansing, tracing silent paths down his cheeks, mingling with the faint scent of old paper and wood smoke lingering like ghosts of his father's presence. His world, once filled with possibility, narrowed to a fracturing poem. This identity fractured between the towering echoes of legacy and a crushing void of failure. In the muted amber glow of the lamp, Richard's breath caught in a raw, guttural exhale, a crack in the armor encasing a man overwhelmed by the weight of expectations and loss. He remained motionless, a solitary figure adrift in the dark sea of the city's night, tethered by the fragile thread of a compass whose needle no longer pointed true. The shadows deepened, swallowing him into silence, as the first tremors of complete unraveling whispered through the Ira's slow, inexorable descent from all that he had known into a vast, uncharted abyss. The apartment felt impossibly vast, the walls echoing back the emptiness that had settled deep within Richard's chest. Night had fully fallen outside, and the city's distant hum was swallowed beneath the heavy silence, leaving only the brittle sound of his breathing and the faint, steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Time, relentless and indifferent, marked each passing second as though counting down to a reckoning he no longer cared to face. The only light came from a dim lamp that cast trembling shadows in the corners. Richard sat hunched on the floor, knees drawn to his chest, the weight of the betrayal and his own failings pressing down like a physical force. His once disheveled hair hung over a face pale and hollow, eyes glazed with fatigue and the dull ache of despair. His fingers rested lightly on the brass compass lying next to him, a relic now seeming distant and foreign. The needle spun slowly, unmoored, reflecting the chaos inside him. It was a cruel metaphor, a guide without direction, a heart broken from its bearings. Memories flickered, fragmented and painful. His father's quiet wisdom whispered through the study's fading light, a promise of guidance that felt increasingly unreachable. The letters, once full of potential, seemed now like echoes of a past he could never reclaim. Outside, rain tapped a mournful rhythm against the glass, a cold and steady reminder of solitude. Richard shivered, the chill seeping into his bones, matching the numb weight that smothered his breath. "Maybe I'm not meant to find the way," he whispered to the empty room, voice fragile and frayed. His gaze drifted to the window where city lights twinkled feebly, distant and indifferent. The familiar skyline seemed alien under the shroud of night, a reminder of how small and lost he had become. A single tear traced a silent path down his cheek, a quiet surrender to the abyss. Around him, the room seemed to contract, the walls closing in until only darkness remained. He closed his eyes, the world fading into a void where hope was a distant, unreachable star. In that engulfing stillness, the compass lay cold and silent, its steady spin a mocking echo of a man who had lost his path. And Richard remained motionless, suspended between the shattered fragments of who he had been and the uncertain shadow of who he might become. The clock continued its merciless tick, unyielding and absolute, as the night deepened into a silence without end. The cold of the night seeped deeper into the apartment, settling over Richard's shoulders like a shroud. His fingers, stiff and trembling, born from long hours spent wrestling with defeat and confusion, instinctively reached out again to the brass compass resting on the worn desk. The soft glow of the wavering lamp overhead flickered gently, casting elongated shadows that breathed life into the quiet despair surrounding him. The compass, once a forgotten heirloom, now pulsed faintly in the dim light, a silent heartbeat that tugged tenderly at a frayed corner of his soul. Richard's gaze traced the delicate needle, which quivered uncertainly before aligning northward, steady and resolute, as though speaking to him across the void. Memories flickered like fragile lanterns in the darkness, his father's steady hands guiding a younger Richard through complex maps of ideas and inventions, his voice soft but unwavering amidst the clatter of a world that never slowed. A breath, sharp and uneven, escaped him as a pale glimmer caught his eye, a folded card tucked beneath a pile of yellowed papers. With hesitant fingers, he unfolded it, revealing familiar handwriting that bore the weight of unfinished conversations. Remember, son, sometimes the path clears only when the heart sees beyond the noise. Richard closed his eyes, the words settling deep within, seeding a faint but vivid pulse of clarity. It was fragile, tentative at first, but beneath the suffocating despair, a spark was kindling. He lingered a moment longer with the compass in his palm, feeling its cold assurance mingle with the warmth blossoming inside. The lamp above hummed softly, unwavering in its gentle light. Outside, the city breathed beneath a sky beginning to hint at dawn, the first tendrils of color stretching cautiously over the horizon. The world waited, patient and unjudging. With a slow, deliberate breath, Richard rose from his chair, the compass a solid weight grounding him against the gale of uncertainty. His steps, once heavy and lost, now bore the faint imprint of purpose. He walked toward the window, eyes scanning the fading stars retreating before the coming light. The city's restless glow mirrored the flicker within him, a promise of new beginnings and the courage to seek the overlooked paths. The silent room held its breath, cradling the fragile moment where despair met awakening. And as the light steadied, so too did Richard's resolve. The journey was far from over, but the first true step had been taken. The darkness that had rooted itself in Richard's mind for so long was slowly beginning to loosen its grip. A faint glow shimmered at the edges of the space where despair had once held him captive, now replaced by a tentative sense of renewal. The old study, cluttered with relics of a bygone era, was bathed in a soft, amber light like dawn's first whisper after a long night. Richard sat in the leather armchair, the brass compass now resting on the wooden desk, its needle finally steady, unwavering. The weight of the past still pressed faintly against him, but a quiet warmth blossomed within, an awakening of something long suppressed. A gentle breeze seeped through the cracked window, carrying with it the distant sounds of San Francisco, waking faint car horns, a bird's song, each a tiny reminder that life persisted beyond the walls of his introspection. The city's pulse, relentless and indifferent, contrasted sharply with his internal stillness, a subtle whisper of hope flickering to life. He reached out hesitantly, fingers brushing the aged, cool metal of the compass. The familiar weight grounded his trembling hands, yet it felt different now, less like an anchor and more like a guide. His eyes traced the intricate carvings on the back, the symbols of guidance and truth etched deep into the brass. Memories surfaced: early mornings in his father's study, quiet moments of connection, the wisdom whispered in shadows. The old letters, dusted and forgotten, suddenly seemed alive, buzzing with unspoken promises. The words he'd once dismissed as relics now shimmered with a truth he had overlooked, a quiet call to venture beyond the surface. A flicker of color returned to his cheeks as he recalled the last message. Asterisk, seek within, and the path will reveal itself. Asterisk, the words echoed softly, like a gentle promise amid the chaos. Despite the shadows lingering at the edges, Richard felt a faint but unmistakable pulse of strength. A fragile light that beckoned him forward, beyond the desolation and doubt, towards the unseen truths waiting quietly in the shadows. He looked down at the compass, its needle unwavering. A symbolic promise, a silent vow that even the faintest flicker of hope could dispel the darkness. His gaze drifted to the window again, watching the city breathe beneath a waking sky. The storm within was slowly settling, giving way to a tentative dawn. The night had not fully receded. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. A whisper of resolve stirred in his chest. In that quiet moment, Richard felt something shift, an opening, fragile but real. The shadows still lingered, but the promise of new beginnings flickered faintly in his eyes, like a lighthouse guiding him through the dark, beckoning him onward. The shadowed depths of the abandoned hospital wing loomed like a silent sentinel, yet Richard moved forward with purpose, each step shedding a layer of fear and doubt that had caked his soul for years. The flickering lights cast fractured glints on the cold, cracked floors, the old corridors whispering of secrets long buried. His breath was steady now, a calm resolve igniting in his eyes as he approached the darkened threshold. The silence was thick, almost alive, humming with the anticipation of the unseen force he sensed lingering in the shadows. His hand reached beneath his hoodie, clutching the compass, its brass surface warm despite the icy air, steadfast and reassuring, a guiding star amid chaos. With a deep breath, Richard pushed open the heavy door, which groaned in protest. Inside, dust motes danced in the weak, wavering glow of an overhead bulb, a fragile beacon flickering between life and death. The room was eerily quiet, the scent of mold and memories filling his lungs. His eyes swept across the room, a mausoleum of discarded memories and fractured reality. The remnants of old beds, broken monitors, and torn curtains lay scattered like the remnants of a lost era. But it was the center, an unassuming console with tangled wires and a flickering screen, that drew his gaze. He knelt, the compass tucked into his palm, feeling its presence solid and unwavering as he reached for the ancient control panel. The screen flickered erratically, then steadied, revealing a series of encrypted messages, minutes and hours of recorded transmissions, and a final note from his father. The shadows hide more than darkness, they conceal the truth. Trust what you carry, and find the light within. The words shivered through the room, a whisper of clarity piercing the fog of despair. Richard's fingers trembled as he decoded the message, every nerve alive with newfound purpose. His mind flooded with memories of the past, the lessons, the hopes, the legacy left unwritten. This was not the end but a rebirth, a chance to reclaim the truth he had long denied. He lifted the compass to the flickering glow, its needle aligning once more, a steady, unwavering force. It was a symbol, an anchor in the chaos, and now, a testament to the path ahead. A faint smile touched his lips as he whispered, "This is the way." The shadows receded slightly, as though reacting to his resolve, and the oppressive silence gave way to a quiet hum of restored energy. The room's fractured light steadied, illuminating the space with a gentle glow. More than illumination, it was an awakening. Outside, the dawn's first light seeped into the cracks of the broken building, casting long, hopeful shadows that stretched into the night's remnants. Richard straightened, his posture firm, eyes alight with purpose. The past and present tangled for a moment, but he had chosen his direction, guided by the compass, rooted in hope. The silent room, once a tomb of secrets, now felt like the birthplace of a new beginning. Richard clutched the compass close, feeling the promise of discovery and the flickering light of truth shining through the darkness, the culmination of his journey to face not just external shadows but his own inner light. The oppressive shadows had receded, replaced by a luminous clarity that seemed to breathe life into the very air itself. Richard stood at the heart of the old study, bathed in a warm, golden glow that poured through the windows, illuminating every relic and dusty corner with a gentle promise of renewal. His posture was upright, now no longer bowed by failure or fear but poised with purpose, a quiet confidence resonating from within. The compass, once trembling and uncertain, now lay steady in his palm, its needle unwavering and alive with a quiet strength. It was symbolic, a relic transformed into a beacon, guiding him not through darkened corridors but into the dawn of a new beginning. A soft hum filled the space, the ambient hum of hope whispering through every crack and crevice. His eyes, clear and resolute, swept across the room, taking in the tapestry of memories, the faded letters, the photographs, the relics of a past that had almost consumed him. But now, they were not chains, they were anchors, grounding him in truth and clarity. He whispered softly, voice full of conviction, "I am ready." The words felt like a covenant, an unbreakable vow to face whatever lay ahead with unshakable resolve. Outside, the city breathed in steady rhythm, vibrant and relentless, yet untouched by the shadows that had threatened to swallow him whole. In this moment, Richard felt the duality of chaos and calm, darkness and light intertwined yet separated by his newfound clarity. The room's gentle illumination grew brighter, as if responding to his awakening, casting long, tender shadows that danced softly along the walls, a silent celebration of the transformation. The relics around him shimmered with an almost sacred glow, nodding to the quiet strength of an heir reclaiming his destiny. His gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the window, where the first light of dawn crested the city's skyline, an emblem of hope, promise, and infinite possibilities. The shadows had retreated, defeated not by force but by the awakening of his heart. Richard took a deep, steadying breath, and in that breath lay unshakable purpose, ready to confront the final darkness, guided by the compass and a spirit reborn. The scene held a silent, powerful stillness, an emblem of victory, a moment etched into eternity, the past forever reconciled with the promise of a new dawn. As dawn's early light seeped softly into the room, the shadows receded, leaving behind a calmness that felt almost sacred. Richard sat quietly in his father's study, the familiar scent of aged books and polished wood grounding him amidst the gentle glow of the morning. The brass compass was placed deliberately on the desk, its needle now steady, emanating a quiet assurance that resonated deep within him. He gazed at the relic, feeling an unspoken bond, a silent conversation that stretched beyond words. The chaos, betrayal, and despair of the past nights had settled into a tranquil acceptance, a gentle understanding that peace was not the absence of struggle but the reconciliation with it. The room around him was bathed in a warm hue, the morning sun casting long, tender rays through the stained glass window. It highlighted the dust motes dancing lazily in the air, each particle shimmering as if celebrating the dawn of a new beginning. The silent weight of the journey lingered, a story woven into every crack and every faded letter, yet now it was woven with threads of resilience and hope. Richard shifted slightly, moving his gaze from the compass to the old letters piled beside it. He leafed through them slowly, each page whispering stories of a forgotten past, of dreams deferred but never entirely lost. The words, once a cryptic puzzle, now unfurled like a map, drawing him onward, beyond the shadows of doubt and into the light of understanding. A soft smile touched his lips, tender and genuine. He pressed his hand gently on the desk, feeling the smooth, cool surface beneath his palm, a symbol of steadiness amid the turbulent seas of emotion. Stillness filled the air. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a reverent pause where past and present converged. Outside, the city stirred to life, vibrant and relentless, but within these walls, a quiet peace had taken root. The chaos of betrayal, loss, and ennui had dissolved into an acceptance, a recognition of his strength, his wounds, and his fragile but unwavering hope. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep, calming breath, feeling the pulse of serenity ripple through him. The compass, the letters, his memories, all threads of a tapestry finally coming together. The silent acknowledgement that he was no longer lost but on the verge of a profound transformation. A gentle gust of wind drifted through the open window, stirring the curtains and whispering promises of fresh beginnings. Richard's face softened, a quiet peace settling over him like dawn's first light, delicately illuminating the path ahead in its tender glow. In that quiet, sacred space, he finally understood, the journey was never just about finding the truth. It was about accepting himself, the past, the pain, and the hope that now flickered softly within. With a steady hand, he reached for the compass once more, not as a guide to the unknown, but as a symbol of the truth he had finally claimed. And as the morning's gentle embrace warmed the room, Richard sat in silent gratitude, ready for what was to come. The gentle dawn spilled amber and rose across the sky, softening the sharp edges of a world that had long seemed fractured. Richard sat in the quiet sanctuary of his father's study, the familiar old desk bathed in a luminous glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The brass compass now rested on the surface, its needle finally still, pointing unerringly toward an unseen truth. His eyes, once clouded with doubt and despair, now shimmered softly with clarity. The shadows that haunted him, internal chaos, the betrayal, the failures dissolved into echoes of a past he now embraced with gentle understanding. Each scar, each regret, had woven itself into a tapestry that led him here, to this moment of profound peace. He lifted the compass again, the weight of it soothing, symbolic of the guidance he'd rediscovered. The faint, flickering light from the study lamp cast a tender glow, illuminating the dust motes that drifted lazily in the Ira silent ballet celebrating renewal. Tucking the compass into his pocket, Richard touched the old letters spread across the desk, words that once seemed cryptic but now revealed a silent dialogue between his past and his present. The faded ink whispered of promises kept and promises yet to come. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the warm serenity that enveloped him, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once threatened to drown him. The city beyond the window pulsed in the distance, vibrant yet distant, a reminder that life reclaimed its rhythm, unfazed by shadows of doubt. A gentle smile crossed his face, the kind that softly emerges when one accepts the full measure of oneself, flaws, failures, and all. He rose with deliberate calm, the old wood of the desk creaking softly under his touch, a humble testament to all that had been endured. As he moved toward the window, the horizon blushed with the promise of dawn. The sky unfurled in hues of hope, stretching endlessly into the future, fear giving way to acceptance, darkness to light. In that quiet, sacred moment, Richard came to understand. The journey was not a quest for perfection, but a path of reconciliation between himself and the past, between dreams and reality, between chaos and calm. He stood there, watchful and calm, the compass a true and steady guide in his hand and in his heart, ready to face the unfolding day with renewed purpose and gentle resolve, a testament that he had finally found peace within. The dawn broke in a gentle cascade of amber and soft pink, spilling through the grand windows of the study where Richard sat quietly, the weight of years and shadows lifted. The brass compass lay before him, its needle now still, centered perfectly, a quiet testament to the journey of awakening he had embarked upon. Light spilled onto the faded letters and photographs scattered across the desk, revealing stories long buried but never forgotten. Richard's face was calm, eyes reflecting the serenity of a soul finally at peace. Every jagged fragment of his past, every betrayal, every failure, had been woven into a quiet tapestry of acceptance. The chaotic whirring of the city beyond had faded into a distant hum, insignificant compared to the symphony of tranquility now settling within him. He reached out slowly, fingers tracing the intricate engravings on the compass, the subtle carvings etched by his father's loving hand, guiding him through doubts, fears, and shadows. The relic, once a fragile emblem of hope, now glowed softly, its silent promise fulfilled. Across the room, the worn letters, once faded and cryptic, caught the morning light, their fragile pages shimmering as if a new chapter had begun. The old photographs, with faces frozen in moments of fleeting joy and struggle, whispered silently of resilience, of lessons learned in quiet darkness, and of love's enduring power. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, stirring the curtains in a slow, undulating dance, an unspoken symbol of the ongoing flow of life, renewal, and rebirth. Outside, the city pulsed with life, yet within these walls, a peaceful stillness reigned, a quiet acknowledgement that the shadows had finally receded. Richard lowered himself into the chair, a soft smile playing on his lips. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling deeply as if releasing a long-held breath. A wave of warmth washed over him, a gentle dawn of understanding. The compass, the letters, the memories, they were no longer burdens but beacons guiding him forward. He gazed at the horizon beyond the window, where light stretched endlessly, promising new beginnings. The world's chaos remained, but it no longer held power over him. The darkness had given way to light, flickering at first, then steady and bright. A quiet, lingering silence enveloped the room as Richard sat, serene, rooted in the knowledge that he was finally whole. The shadows of doubt, betrayal, and loss had dissolved into a radiant peace, leaving behind only the warm glow of hope and the gentle reminder that sometimes, the journey back to oneself is a quiet awakening, an eternal dawn. What would you feel hearing a lost voice? Share your story.